Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Eternal News episode. So Direwolf just dropped a surprise balance change patch on us yesterday, a bit more than a week before the next ECQ. Pretty out of left field. Not a ton of changes, but some pretty impactful ones. So I'll take a look at them with you and give you my thoughts on them. Alright, so first off, we have Yennev Merchant. It got turned from a 3-2 to a 2-2. And I think by now we all kinda know how bad 3-cost 2-2s are. We know that from Winchest Merchant, we know that from the new Skycrack Smuggler, forgot the full name. All in all, you have to do a lot to make up for being 2-2 for 3. And I don't think Aegis is doing enough here, so in my opinion Yennev Merchant is almost dead, basically, just like, I don't know, Winchest Merchant for example. So what does that mean? That means yeah, that first of all weakens obviously the peak decks a bit, because they have been running Yennev Merchant. Yennev Merchant has been really good in the deck, especially against other reactive controlling type decks, and in conjunction with Peak, because it's a very good safe target for mirror image and stuff. And it turned into a 3-5 with Peak, making it also immune to relic weapon kills right away. So that's a pretty huge change. I think that also means that while people were leaning towards merchants in Skycrack these days, which I am not 100% sure, but I could see the benefit of what and Rausch was doing with his list. At this point, I think you absolutely have to go back to no merchant in Skycrack, because the merchants are now such a bad rate for their cost that they cripple your aggressive plan so much more than any benefit you get from them. I think the benefit was kind of questionable before. Sure, it gave you some flood protection stuff, but it also played a comparably weaker unit for 3 power than you could potentially get if it was a non-merchant. So yeah, that's about it about Yennev Merchant. And the next change is another merchant, so Ixtun Merchant, the other omnipresent merchant. Also, a lot of Peak decks have been running both. Now they probably want to run 0 of either, because they're pretty bad, especially Yennev Merchant. Ixtun Merchant isn't quite as bad. It's still pretty bad, because a 3-2 Overwhelm is still pretty bad, since 2 health is a huge problem. The unit's main benefit was being 3 health and therefore blocking most of the early game units without dying, and therefore providing a solid stabilization defense the turn you play it if the opponent didn't have a way to deal with it. That is now gone. Now your Ixtun Merchant casually trades with only Ronin, which is a rough beat. So these changes should significantly benefit aggressive decks, for that matter, because the merchants being worse at blocking, at trading, is a big deal there. Ixtun Merchant might still be fringe playable in certain decks, although I definitely like him a lot less than before, but a 3-2 at least can trade with like the 3 health 2-drops, unlike Yennev, so it at least trades better than Yennev while still having the same issues of being poor at blocking anything without trading. So what does that mean? It drastically changes the whole merchant smuggler metagame in a way. I think basically Yennev and Winchester are almost unplayable now. Ixtun is close behind, so the only 2 sort of playable merchants are Kerendon and Aurelian Merchant, and both of those only really fit into reactive decks most of the time. Scream Aggro was kind of a special case, special scenario regarding Kerendon Merchant, because of how the deck played out, and the card would have and the deck would have definitely preferred Kerendon Merchant to be different from what it is, but it just ended up in there. So most of the time only shadow and time based mid-rangey and controlling more grindy decks have a good merchant option now. And in regards to smugglers, we basically have the Rakano, Illusion, and Argentport Smugglers as being really good, and then 2 pretty bad ones in Skycrack and Xenon. So there is basically the merchants to make up for like the Xenon issue, but Skycrack colors are in a particularly rough spot because both their merchants are pretty bad now and their smuggler is pretty bad too. And we will definitely see a lot more smugglers now, because while smugglers have a real downside, now the upside over regular merchants is big enough to not care too much. This will obviously reduce consistency index because black market doesn't allow you to play cards in your main deck that are in your market and vice versa. So this consistency enhancing effect of merchants is greatly diminished because merchants are just so bad now that you kind of want to give up the virtual 3 extra copies of a main deck card in order to have a real unit that gives you some utility. The 3 good merchants are partially good because they have good stats and especially because they have 3 health. So they actually block without dying to everything, which is a pretty big deal. And obviously they also have good abilities. So I think the X-Tune Peak stacks will probably just convert to playing Red Canyon Smuggler and leave it at that. That would be my guess. And yeah, then we have the sort of Yennev decks that can just look into the Illusion Smuggler. And yeah, the Winches decks are very well off because they can still run their 8 Smuggler setup, like LSV did in his video, and various versions of that, or just run one of those if they don't want an 8 Smuggler deck. But yeah, this color combination definitely has the most options in that regard. They even have the Karen and Merchant still, so you can even run like the 10 Merchant Smuggler setup that LSV had in his deck still, because this color combination has the highest density of good Smuggler Merchant type units. So that's a pretty big deal. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of splash damage of the nerf in Yennev Merchant to mid-rangey aggressive decks, because there was a very good unit there. The 3-2 Aegis in a proactive deck was a pretty good body already, especially if you had like some combat tricks and or weapons, and that definitely hurts them. There were some horror variants and stuff like that, but yeah, I don't think this was as much of a... Yeah, this was not as much of a nerf to Peak specifically, as they say here, with Aurelian Merchant already getting hit with a nerf. Yennev Merchant, X-Tune Merchant have been in ongoing discussion for potential reduction in power level. That they have been so popular and successful is not inherently problematic. However, they were both already pushing the boundaries, and the number of high impact cards in Defiance have helped push them over the line. We are confident these minor stat modifications preserve their primary functionality, which I find very doubtable, because I think they are just too weak now to justify putting in your deck. They are like bad limited bodies now. While just pulling back a little on how powerful of game pieces they are on the table. We are also keeping a close watch on several Defiance cards that players have already started to adapt to, that will hopefully be brought a little more into line with the merchant changes, which obviously includes especially Howling Peak. Not sure what else they are talking about, but Howling Peak is the primary candidate they mention here, I'm sure. So yeah, they basically just wanted to pull back the merchants, just like they did with Aurelian Merchant, partially because the options they got from Defiance made them even better and too omnipresent. Having like 7 peaks and having a peak all the time reliably at 6 apparently was a bit too good when you virtually run 11 of them. So yeah, they did it. Merchants are getting worse and worse in a way with these changes. We'll see how far this goes. I'm still honestly missing sideboards, because there are so many cool cards in this game that we'll never see play because they're not good market cards, but they would be interesting sideboard cards. So I kind of dislike how not having a sideboard limits the playable card pool in a way, because sideboards often give room to cards that otherwise are not playable because they are too niche, too specific. But in the right matchups where this specificality is desired, the cards suddenly are awesome. But yeah, I doubt we will see sideboards anytime soon, so no point in wallowing in it. And last but not least, Change Stick Spellcraft got changed from 4 to 5, which is a limited nerf since the card was kept in the curated packs for the new format and continues to be the limited staple. And yeah, it's just a bit too good, and they finally pulled back on it after they didn't do it in prior changes. And then we have one last change. It's a small buff. Tavia, Lesrai Raid Leader, now has Quick Draw, which actually is a fairly big change since the card was pretty bad before, as I mentioned in my review, just too underpowered. But I think now with the Quick Draw, she is in a position where she actually is pretty decent, since S3 to Quick Draw for 2 effectively for the first few turns. It's a pretty solid body. She's still weak on defense and all, but she has this upside of turning a power into two 1s for 5 power and stuff. So yeah, she has some solid utility going for herself, and this Quick Draw might make her at least a consideration in Constructed, even though I don't think the support for Elf's Tribal is there. She might just be interesting enough on her own or in conjunction with Rista in certain decks. We'll see if there's something that can be done with Tavia now, because she's at least at a power level that makes her reasonable to mess around with, because she attacks pretty well now. Okay, that's it for the changes. I don't think the metagame will change too much. I think it mostly will change how the decks look, and also a bit how they perform. But all in all, I think that changes only pull back the archetypes that exist rather than breaking any archetypes. Like I said, for example, the peak stacks will maybe go from like 8 merchants to 4 smugglers and stuff like that, but the rest is still kept intact. But as we saw here, they're considering potential changes to Defiance cards and keeping an eye out, so we might see another balanced patch after the next ECQ, for example, potentially hitting peak and who knows what else. Okay, that's it again for this time. This was Eternal News with the latest balance patch 1.42, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments what you think about the changes and my assessment of them. And of course, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and check out my social media and Discord server in the description. And please consider whitelisting eternaltitans.com and YouTube to help support the free content. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time. Bye!